Rosie, it's great to have you joining us again. We're back in the recording studio.
Thanks, Matthew. Great to be back here. Thank you.
Well, we're going to be talking a little bit about MIS, and also you've written a fantastic paper as part of your MBA from Henley, which I have read. So we're going to be dipping into that a little bit. But just a bit about background of you, first of all. Chief Product Officer for McKenzie Intelligence Services. You started off your career in an insurer, so you're sort of living the recommendation I think you've made yourself in the paper about insurtechs and people servicing insurance companies need more insurers. But what was it that took you from a sort of working for a large organization in insurance into the slightly more crazy world of startup and scale up?
When I was working for the insurer, I had the luxury of sort of working on the projects that evaluated vendors. Who should we work with? How should we work with them? I was responsible for bringing in new geospatial technology and modelling companies into that insurer. And it gave me this wonderful window into what happens when you try to work with an insurer, but also the huge range of vendors that actually are serving the insurance community. So there were academic organisations, there were modelling companies, and then there was this wonderful little gem of companies called insurtech, and I just thought they were really cool, and that's what I wanted to go and spend a bit more time on. I'd also been in the insurer for 8 years, and that 10-year mark on the horizon was coming quite quickly. And I thought, I think I need to move before that comes, otherwise I don't think I'll ever leave. So then I joined Insurtech World, and I've been here now about 5 years, 3 of those with MIS.
And tell me a bit about the paper, because I'm sure the day job is busy enough. It's quite something taking on an MBA. I think you've got 64 pages in your, your dissertation in there. So I guess if anybody thinking about doing it, how do you find the time, first of all, to actually go and study on the side when you've got a full-time job?
Well, I'm sure you've had a taste of how difficult that is now that you've actually read those 64 pages. So thank you for reading it, Matthew. I really appreciate making time for that. Yeah, so for the last 21 months, I've been studying an MBA with Henley Business School, and it's been really huge testament to MIS's flexibility that has allowed me to just survive that. It's involved being off to Henley for weeks at a time, spending my weekends in the beautiful Greenlands campus overlooking the Thames with incredible academics and lecturers who are sharing sort of the latest research they've done in business, be that in UK or international study, and then the opportunity to apply that to MIS. So all of the work that I did was applicable to my current role. So whilst it was a lot of weekend works and late nights, it actually really did help the day job. And then that final push, the dissertation, which is something I can share publicly, that was really about any topic that interested me. So that's when I made the pivot to thinking about the industry and insurtech adoption a bit broader. But I think the biggest thing is making sure that you've communicated with your employer and you've got the support, because it takes time out. And even though you can be disciplined and only do it on weekends, most of us, we're not robots, and we do need a day here and there to just catch a breath. So making sure you've got an understanding employer is really a big deal, I think.
Yeah, and understanding family as well, I should think.
Yes, yeah, family and friends, and just letting them know you're going to be out of the game for a couple of years is pretty wise, but definitely rewarding and worthwhile. And that sounds quite flippant to say, but I really mean it, that the sacrifice has been worthwhile. I've gained so much from the experience.
Well, one of the really interesting things that you put in there was how you found you had to manage your own biases, because there's a very rigorous process in doing these papers. I was really intrigued by the whole approach you took to how you asked the questions and you reviewed them. But that'd be really interesting just to understand, kind of going into it, how you had a certain point of view, and then how did that change as you went through the study?
Yeah, I think there were 2 big biases that I was aware of that I had at the beginning. So one of them, you've mentioned, my own career path. I've spent time in insurer. I'm now in insurtech, and I really think that's helped me be a better CPO. I understand our clients' worlds a little bit better than if I hadn't worked in them. So I had to keep checking that bias and know that, there are other career paths available and ways of doing things. But I think the second one that really struck me is, and this this was something I learned from feedback with my professor that I was working with. I have a huge bias to thinking insurance is the answer to most things. And so the paper is really framed around the protection gap, and specifically the protection gap increasing in areas where it hasn't existed before. So I'm not really talking about emerging markets. I'm focusing on areas that as an industry we've been responding to challenges there for a long time. Thinking about California and the Florida and the news stories that we're seeing still of carriers pulling out. That was the bit that was really interesting to me. And my bias was, well, it's an insurance problem and therefore an insurance solution. And I really had to check that. And it came up with the conversations I was having with insurers as part of the research, that there might need to be other mechanisms that come into play with insurers, with banks, with governments, that actually start to address some of these problems that we're seeing with climate change. And it's not going to stop with a bad storm season. We will get to a point where we've got scary things like population displacement happening, and it's not just on the insurance organisations to respond, but them collaborating with other entities. But that bias certainly had to be pulled out quite quickly at the beginning of insurance might not be the answer.
But also, you summarised it towards the end. The assumption that the protection gap was a driver for innovation was not ratified by the researchers. So to some extent, you disproved your theory, which is, you would be quite brave saying in a write a paper and your summary at the end of it is, I've done the work and I'm wrong. Or at least in your case, I think probably you could categorise it as not so narrow as you might have described it.
Yeah, exactly that. So I had this great idea that what was challenging was the protection gap, and everyone was trying to solve it and they just didn't know how. And what I found was, well, we're not necessarily directly trying to solve all of it, and that obviously sounds very bad, but for very good reason. And what insurance is there for is to make sure that people can get their livelihoods, their businesses, their families up and running after a loss. You can't just look at one type of loss in one type of territory and one type of pattern that's happening and saying we're going to fix that. The job of the insurance industry is to be providing resilience across huge populations. And so climate change isn't the only thing they need to think about. And it kind of struck me as pretty shocking at some points when I was having quite frank conversations with people who were saying financially we cannot cover that risk any longer. Full stop. We're not trying to find ways to start covering it. We need to find ways to understand it differently and to work with other entities in order to change how we respond. It's not just trying to sort of shoehorn a response that we've had for years into this new world. And that was a bit of a surprise for me.
Yeah, although coming at it from a positive angle, I suppose you can take some comfort from the fact that in the US, for example, the government is opening up the National Flood Insurance Program, and that's actually moving back into insurers. So I think part of the challenge is that, or not a challenge, because in some cases governments need to be there to support the payment, so it's actually not competitive for insurers to do it. But just to leave that particular bit on a positive note, and maybe you are allowed a little bit of a caveat to your point about the protection gap was not a driver for innovation. Arguably, we're seeing a lot more happening in flood in the US now as a result of the government actually freeing up.
And I think that's it. It's a driver for innovation, but it's not just the sort of technology innovation that can solve it. And when I think about a drive for innovation, I think, well, as an insurtech, how am I responding to that? And actually realizing that just the insurtech product in itself isn't going to meet the requirements, and actually that government relationship needs to be strengthened, and how the regulators are involved. And then we see great things like the developments on the National Flood Programme is a real positive, but I think I had this in some assumption going into it that it was a decision that sat solely with insurers about whether they chose to innovate or not, and actually that's actually not the case.
So just building on that, another theme that sort of comes out in this, and I know we want to talk a bit more about, is this whole move from disruption to collaboration. So when Forbes set up McKenzie Intelligence Services back in, I think it was 2011, did he come in thinking he was going to disrupt the industry and, like everybody else at the time, just, go around saying how bad insurers were at doing their job?
No, I don't think so. I think also, Forbes' background from the military definitely brought a sense of MIS is here to serve the industry, and I think you can see evidence of that in the roots of our organisation, working very closely with Lloyd's, and almost our product organically falling out of that process of understanding what the client needed, probably before we were even referring to them as a client at that point, to be quite honest, and then the product sort of coming out as a result. However, I think what we have now achieved is some level of disruption to a very small part, and that being event response. And I don't think that disruption is something that has happened or that we've caused to insurers, but to vendors and the organisations who are supplying insurers with solutions. I feel like we've brought a bit of disruption there, because event response has always been underserved compared to any other area of property insurance. When we look at modelling, etc., even data enrichment for underwriting, event response is always the bit that you kind of pick those solutions and tailor it to how do we respond to this event. And I think we have done a good job at disrupting that point, which I'm quite proud of, because our product now is being used in a way that hasn't had a natural competitor before. Now, of course, times have changed since then, and we've got competitors now, which is really great. But actually, putting event response on the map, pardon the pun, I think has been a disruptive effort.
Yeah, let's come back and talk a bit more about that. But just before we do, just so anybody doesn't understand what event response is, this is essentially the assessment after a major catastrophe, typically a major catastrophe, things happening now for smaller losses as well. Basically, and you can talk a bit more about what you do at MIS, but providing visual imagery, analytics, data, so that insurers can very quickly work out both where damage and losses occurred to their policyholders, and also as they look at across their whole portfolio, actually start to understand what the financial losses are. MIS has been working with Lloyd's for a number of years now, yeah. and so you're, if not unique, certainly very few organisations have been able to actually go out and offer services into a market. Coming back to that point about disruption, so how would you characterise the difference between what's happening before and what's happening now, and how is that disruptive?
I think when workflows start to change, I think that's when you can see that disruption has happened. It's not just about creating new products. And yeah, the great bit about our product is we've got this intelligence and this assessment and all this data and imagery, but the really cool bit is that we have a place for exposure managers and claims professionals to come together and make a decision based on a risk. And that's the change in the workflow that when we're thinking about someone's response to how would we prepare for a major hurricane, or how would we prepare for conflict in Ukraine, our system is now actually part of that. And there are other systems that are contributing as well. But I think that's where the disruption is. There's now a real focus on the workflow aspect. And going back to my paper, but the whole point of why I wanted to do this, and what I thought there was a real need for there to be innovation for closing the protection gap. And I could see lots of companies like MIS delivering products that I thought were really great and really useful. And when I put my insurance hat back on, I thought, well, there's the answer. Why aren't we using it? And so I thought the trouble was with adoption. And I think disruption and adoption go hand in hand, and not all adoption needs to be disruptive. But for it to be successful and for there to be an impact, people's everyday work needs to be easier, needs to be more effective. And I think that's the bit that we've seen with the workflow piece, that decisions are now being made further up the chain. Authorities had to be redistributed so people can make assessments on triage before FNOL has even occurred. That's disruptive. The key thing is, disruption doesn't need to be painful, and you don't have to run the 26 miles. It should be making your life easier. And that was a huge thing that came out, that as insurtechs and technology vendors more generally, we're really poor at estimating the cost of adopting new ways of working and new technologies. And you could be sat with your insurer saying, I'm going to save you 2 points on your COR, which would be astounding. Can't wait for that product to be out. But let's say that's what you're saying, but you've grossly underestimated how difficult it's going to be to actually help someone bring in that technology, change their workflows, change their teams, get the right permissions, change authority, speak to their regulator. Suddenly that 2% is 5 years down the line. And in the meantime, they have to kind of make a big old business case to actually do this disruption. So it has to make sense. Yeah.
You've got me on COR. I'm normally pretty good with my acronyms. I'm guessing it's cost of...
combined operating ratio.
Okay, so we are talking insurance talk. So you're saying 2%. So 2% reduction in your combined operating ratio is basically a 2% reduction in your overall costs of running the business, which is a large number. Your point is it takes a long time and it's very hard to measure. Okay, I want to come back to something else you were saying actually there, Rosie, which is, it sounds like when you're talking about collaboration and partnerships, the way you were describing it earlier was about the exposure management team are talking to the claims team. And so it's a really important point that collaboration can happen within inside an organization as well, and partnerships, not just about going to find somebody else. It's like, here's someone who works across the corridor from you and suddenly you can start working together. Was that part of your finding?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's like how you make it easy for people to collaborate, whether it's with your business and theirs or within their business. And one of the points of the finding is, let's not go to insurance companies and just sell. Even if your product is, no code and all of these other buzzwords that make it easy, you can't just sell. You have to consult and be part of the effort to bring it into the system, to bring it into the sort of the DNA of the organization and almost create institutional knowledge. And that's often not going to be achieved with the person who, is the main champion in that organization. And it's hard enough to find those individuals, but once you've found them, they then have a big job to do, which is to bring other people from around their business together to actually get the value out of your product or your service or your new ways of working. And I think as people building solutions for insurers, we should be thinking about what happens after we've made that sell and we've gone through procurement, and we're not just in a round of monthly servicing meetings, but we're actually collaborating on that workflow. We're helping that champion embed it in other areas of their business, no least so actually people get value out of your product, but also so you get new ideas coming through. The champion in that organization will see it through one lens, but they're supporting colleagues in claims, exposure management, underwriting will have another view as well. And that's, I think, where the real exciting thing starts to come. And for me, that is where we get to the point where we're actually thinking about adoption.
Yeah, because you need more than one person. You had a great quote in your paper as well. You said, there's always someone had said to you that the head of innovation at insurance companies is a bit like being head of nutrition at Häagen-Dazs, which I thought, I don't think that's quite as bad everywhere these days. I'm sure there's still some companies like that, but it has been a challenge, isn't it? People have been given that title, and then you can sort of visualize an insurance company where they're trying to suggest people get innovate, and every time an underwriter sees them, they run away because they just want to do their day job, and no thank you, I don't want to innovate today, got to get my job done.
Yeah, exactly. And so we had quite a lot of insight into how difficult those sorts of roles can be, even when you've got the sort of the basics sorted, like you've got the budget aligned, you've got the time in stakeholders' diaries. It's beyond getting the good idea, getting people excited about the good idea. It's about that month 2, 3, 4 after procurement's happened, and once you've had the big announcement in the papers and everyone's excited that we've got this new technology. What happens in those months is, I think, where the value really can be won or lost. And I think that's where head of innovations, head of underwriting, whoever your champion is, really needs the support from you as a vendor to say, I'm noticing this is how people are using it here, and we've got some, I hate the term, but like best practices that we've been developing with other companies, and would you consider something like this? And every company's different, but keeping that conversation ongoing, so it's kind of after the fanfare of the big announcement and everyone's happy they got something through. Okay, then the people whose jobs this is actually, who want to do their day jobs, are actually getting the value from it, and their jobs have somehow got easier.
Yeah, because you don't want to mention names, but if you look back in the last probably now 8 years since the term insurtech was invented, there are quite a few companies that look like doing really well, and then for various reasons the product just doesn't work. So they get into the company, but to your point, you've got to keep that momentum going. But I want to come back on this partnership more broadly. So one of the challenges, and you would have seen this, or certainly your colleagues would have in the early days of MIS, is when you go and sell to an insurance company, it's a little bit what you talked about. It's really hard to find the right people, yes, but also that whole integration piece. So because to some extent, I guess you're a platform, you bring in third-party data, you've got access to the clients, you've got access across a whole different range of insurance companies within Lloyd's. What have you been seeing about that role, or the sort of the evolution of the role for collaboration amongst the technology companies, insurtechs, the startups, to actually be more effective about how they go to the insurers, and I guess ultimately also more effective for the insurance company to be working with these companies in a more kind of consistent, standardized way?
Yeah, so I always thought the answer was, well, just have loads of flexible integration options. And so we did that. We've got a platform, we've got a data feed, we've got an export to Excel, everything like that. We've got an API. That'll be the answer. And then really understanding that when you tell an insurance company we've got an API, they hear, oh, that's an 18-month project then, because I've got to go and get resource, and I've got to make a business case and have a project manager assigned. And, it's not enough just to have lots of options. Sometimes you actually have to almost dictate us a solution, and a way to make it easy is to take that thinking away. Still having that collaboration and that kind of discussion, but understanding where the insurer is and what their priorities are, and crucially, what systems do they already use and like. And that's been a really big thing. Like, it might not make sense, but they like it. And that's, we can all design on whiteboards more efficient ways of working. But this is something they like, and their organisation has evolved. Its processes and its training sits around this technology. So why don't we go and talk to that technology provider and see if this really efficient way that we've thought about can actually just be integrated into something that our customers already like.
Yeah.
It's efficiency for efficiency's sake. We can all talk and what a great idea that is. But at the end of the day, technology is being used by people, and we need those people to enjoy using it. Otherwise, they just won't.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. So that's something that we're really pushing this year. We've launched a partnerships program at MIS, and we're picking partners to work with who, first of all, it makes sense from our businesses and our solutions combined make sense. But secondly, they're organisations that customers have told us we use them and we like to do so. Right. And that's really important.
I know you can't reveal yet who those are going to be, so we'll have to wait a little bit longer. But
thank you.
In terms of sort of characteristics of organizations, because the way I think about it, oversimplifying it, but there's two types of people you could partner with in MIS. There are the organizations that already have access into the insurance companies, and that would generally be the big policy administration systems. And then there are also the people that are actually providing data and analytics. So I want to say one of those are coming in to you, that you're giving access to your clients. The other one is essentially you're going out through other companies. Can you talk a little bit about the balance where you see the benefits of partnerships? Initially, I guess, from the MIS perspective, is it through other people's platforms, or is it through the data that you can actually enhance your own analytics?
Yeah, I'll give the politics answer, a bit of both. So with the sort of the people that are out there creating data and pushing it into organisations, it makes a lot of sense that we're sort of there holding that hand and jumping in at the same time, in the same place, in the same way. There's a lot of things we can do to make it easier for people consuming data. Be that, MIS is the capsule that delivers extra data, or that we're delivered alongside something that they already consume. And again, going back to that collaboration, that I believe that's the insurer's choice. We will go and design solutions that work well from a product perspective. They don't need to be spending time consulting on us and one of their other vendors of how we should work well together. We can solve that, but they can choose who they want to carry and who they want to bring in. And indeed, we've got several conversations with a partner where different insurers have chosen different ways of doing that, and some have a preference for us, some have a preference for them. and it's fine, because the end of the day, it's just getting the value in the way that they currently like it. On the more from a systems perspective, it makes more sense for us to go there, because obviously the systems are usually integrated with more than one department. And I think that's something that's really exciting, especially for a product like Geo, where we currently speak to exposure managers and claims professionals predominantly. As we're bringing more of our features this year to market, there will be natural use cases evolving for underwriters. But often underwriters aren't logged onto an event response platform. They're over in their policy admin systems. They're working with their pricing data sets. So we need to find a way to be there that doesn't look like getting underwriters to log onto a new system, because it doesn't make sense for them. So yeah, I think where policy admin systems and sort of pricing modelling comes into play, it makes a lot more sense for parts of Geo to feature in those areas.
Yeah, well, I can have an idea of which kind of companies you might want to partner with. I'm not going to put you on the spot by really calling them out and looking at your reaction, but maybe I'll write them down, put them in a sealed envelope, and we can have a big reveal in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a theme for this year. It makes complete sense. And I mean, to your point, there's a few things in there sort of worth coming back to. One is, if not, it is enjoy, really. People have to want to be able to use technology in any kind. And the reality is, personal life, business life, really, we're the same people. We actually want to engage with technology in a way that's relatively straightforward. And there's a kind of, there's a cognitive dissonance, there's cognitive overload, which comes from having to try out new things. People just don't do it. They'd rather do the old thing, even if it's not as good. So that all makes complete sense. And this sort of integration, and also this point about, you kind of want to be where your customers are, as in the sense of, you don't want them to have to go and dust off the event response machine when the hurricane comes in, and it's like, okay, I haven't used this for 6 months. How do I work this? It's just turning up in someone else's platform that's in front of them. And others are doing it and have done really well. So I think that's going to be very encouraging. And I think we're going to see a pretty significant step up actually in terms of organisations that are working with insurers now, because it's just getting so much easier to do that. Not everyone's going to survive, obviously, because ultimately it reveals the ones that people like and don't like, and they work. But it's really, really encouraging to see that's happening.
Yeah, and I think something about longevity in there as well. We spoke to quite a few insurers as part of the research, and something that came through quite strongly was, whilst insurtech is really exciting, it can sometimes feel transient, even though lots of us have been around a long time now, and like you said, it's an established area. It's compared to what the timescales insurers are working on, it doesn't feel like it's been established for as long as them, and it hasn't been. And it's great that we're all launching new solutions, but there has to be stuff that sticks, that is dependable, that they can rely on to be there in 5 years' time. And I think there's that tricky balance of showing that your product is constantly evolving and changing, and you're bringing in the latest technology, but also creating a sense of safety and reliability, that we're not just going to tear it up every 18 months and change it. And I think having partnerships with more established organisations can help give that sort of sense of longer term reliability. Even though we're kind of hitting those metrics on your procurement spreadsheets and all that good stuff, we can show that we're doing it. We are changing and upgrading a lot, and that's what you expect from us, because we are bringing that innovation to you. Like, this time last year, we brought in the streetcar for the first time post-hurricane. We need to keep doing that. But the way you interact with it and how it looks and feels can't be any different. That can't change. Yep. And I think partnerships between small organisations, larger organisations, old, new, technology-based, and perhaps not so technology-based, actually give a fairer balance that makes it a bit more accessible to insurers.
And what kind of partnerships should people avoid? Something
that I think is very easy is the really sort of shiny ones. It's really easy to kind of be blinded by the light of, we've got something new and you've got something new, and if they came together, that could be really, really cool. And it's so tempting to do that because there's so many great ideas out there, but I think they should be avoided. And initially, something needs to stick and be sort of voted for by insurers as this is actually useful.
Yeah.
And then it's shiny on a whole nother level. And then the new exciting things can come and attach to that. And it kind of acts as a bit of a sandbox where you can come and test and learn from those new things. But I think it has to be anchored to something robust that's actually being used. Otherwise, you can sink a lot of hours into coming up with the sort of the art of the possible and bringing all these new things together without actually just testing them on the ground, in a live environment.
Yeah.
So lots of new things, I think, can be dangerous. Also really exciting. So let's not just turn off all the good ideas, and lots of great stuff comes out of those collaborations. But we're really looking for things that are tried and tested to collaborate with, and also the new stuff that fits alongside the things that we're known for, that we know people are coming back to season after season. Yeah,
no, I mean, there's a place in the new things. You mentioned a little bit about incumbent insurers in your paper, and obviously the other side of that is the MGAs, emerging MGAs that are finding new technologies to write new lines of business, and you almost have to do new things there. But I mean, to your point, it seemed like the right place to start with a partnership is where you've got a client, the insurance company is also working with somebody else to use the data. You're essentially just creating the plumbing to join them all together. You're not trying to force them to go and use somebody else. It's like, look, we just do that final mile, and everyone's happy because it's all plumbed in, and mixing my metaphors a little bit. But so that's presumably a little bit what you mean about watch out for two brand new shiny things, because they might not work together.
Exactly. To go back to the marathon analogy, it's like two big sprints at the beginning is kind of a bit risky, and actually let's just partner and help each other out nearer the end, when we know that the end is in sight and we've done the hard work and something's a bit more mature. Otherwise we're just going to burn out of energy. We just all run off at the beginning. Well,
good, Rosie, we covered a lot there. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that we should be catching up on just now?
I think the big theme, as I said, was about adoption, and it's something that I've become really passionate about over the last few months. I've always thought insurtech was an incredible place for having these new ideas, and insurers was an incredible place for solving the world's problems. And as I said, some of those biases were confirmed, and others actually were a bit more complicated. But I think I really want to kind of start this conversation about adoption being something that brings insurers and insurtech together. I think it's a huge challenge that not really any amount of funding or great product ideas is going to solve on its own, or new innovation teams or whatever solutions we've had that have helped us in the past. It is the problem that will be solved by collaboration in the industry. And also we should be quite harsh on ourselves. If good products aren't being adopted, then they're not good products. And we should learn to, we can stop some things and be open with having that conversation of, it didn't work. We thought it would. It didn't. It should. But it didn't. So we're stopping.
No, exactly. Well, it's fantastic. So in terms of people wanting to actually get access to your paper, is that now out for, you gave me a sneak preview.
Yes.
Is that now out for the general public to be able to review it? And if so, how do people find it?
Yeah, so you can contact me. I'm very happy to give you copies of it. But at MIS, we're going to be taking some of the findings of it and just breaking it down into more digestible chunks, so you don't have to suffer 64 pages. So that will be available through our social channels and also our website.
No, I think people should read all 64 pages. They can probably get away with 4 pages of the sort of references at the end, but certainly they should not skip it. Whereas that was fantastic. Thanks for catching up, and it's just really good to get your perspective as having worked in insurance and in technology and in insurtech, and seeing how it's all come together. And I'm sure some lessons in your paper that people will be looking at and going, okay, we need to do things slightly better. So
Thank you. And I just want to, if I can, just thank everyone who gave me some time for the paper and was part of the research, because I had some incredible opinions and experiences feed into it. So it's, I basically did the write-up, but the actual content is from people in the industry, insurers, insurtechs, in the US and the UK. So thank you to everyone who took part.
They're all secret though, aren't they?
They're all very secret.
Unless they revealed themselves.
Yeah. Sorry.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.